Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of season 6 of GameSense. I'm Ruth Toomey, going to be your host tonight. We're super excited to be here. Week 1 is in the books, and what an epic week it was. Tonight with us from RSN, we have Nick Lawrence. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. I work at Anymark as a mechanical systems designer, and I'm a mentor for Team 3940 Cybertooth.
And joining us again this week is Tom Bottiglieri.
Hey, I'm Tom. I work with Team 2v4.
And rounding out the RSN analyst, we have Evan Morrison joining us. Evan, can you introduce yourself?
Howdy, folks. Evan Morrison, Apex Robotics technical mentor. Yeah, really excited to be here. First show of the season.
And we are super excited to have our first guest of the season, Patrick Wolfenden, lead mentor and drive coach of 2910 Jack and the Bot. Patrick, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. So I started first as a student on Jack and the Bot, 2009 and 2010. And then I went off to college, in Minnesota for a couple of years and refereed. And then I came back to Washington and mentored Jack and the Bot starting 2017.
Coincidentally, that's right about when Jack and the Bot started getting real good. Just
exciting
saying.
stuff. And of course, you're coming off of a big win for you guys this weekend over in the Mount Vernon in PNW. So definitely congratulations on that. You guys are off to a fantastic season. For those of you in the chat, thanks for tuning in. We are taking questions all night. Make sure you type !Q in the chat, and Stephanie Morrison, who's behind the scenes directing the show, will grab those questions and we'll answer those later at the end of the show. But definitely ask those the entire show. We'll answer the ones we like. If we don't like it, we'll probably laugh about it later. Most importantly, before we get into the topics tonight, we don't take ourselves too seriously, and you shouldn't either. Have fun with robots, and if you don't like what we say on the show, go out and prove us wrong. And with that, let's go into discussion, topics of discussion for this week. Patrick, let's talk about some of the interactions that we saw this week on the field, the good and the bad.
All right, so a couple things we noticed just participating in a week 1 event. So we had our vision working to align our swerve drive to the vision tape on the various field elements, but it didn't work as well on the actual field because there's this piece between the vision tape is metal on the actual field, and in all of our practice elements it was always wood. But when we got real up close to it, it would reflect back, and the way our limelight's mounted, it's sort of straight on, and we sort of lost the vision tape right when we got real close. So kind of how our alignment works is we just PID with the limelight's coordinates, and that takes control of the left and right movement of the swerve, and then the in and out is still controlled by the driver. And we had it really dialed in, so we could just basically hold down a button and push forward on the translation stick, and the robot would hit it plus or minus less than an inch every time. But it didn't work on the actual field. So that was, I don't know, maybe something that I would recommend teams put that metal thing on their practice elements and just make sure it still works.
Yeah, that's the that little 3-inch deep cutout or whatever it is above and below the hole. Yeah. And it's interesting because I know you and I were kind of chatting after the event a little bit about this, because we have a limelight as well, but ours is mounted way up high looking down, and we didn't have any of those issues. So it's really just, if depending on where you have it mounted, I think if you're looking straight on to this unpainted piece of metal, it's going to reflect back pretty brightly. Right. So, because we didn't notice anything, and I didn't even think anything of it until Patrick mentioned that they didn't have their vision working. It's like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's good to know because we're looking at remounting our cameras to a different location anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So it sounds like the actual field is quite a bit different in terms of robot and sensor interaction from the practice field elements at home, which does happen year over year. But it sounds like the differences are a little bit more drastic this year than in others.
Yeah, I feel kind of dumb for not even like thinking about the fact that it's a big silver piece that's fairly reflective. And it's funny, our limelight, this is going to be a thing we're going to run into as a team because our limelight is mounted basically center of the keyhole on level 1. So that'll be a thing that we're going to find out this weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, we totally thought about it. We're done with that. Never mind me furiously messaging our programming lead student to put a piece of metal up there on the practice field. So
it's just one of those little things that you never think about, right? Like,
yeah,
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
Patrick, you were also saying something about the bumper field before the show. They were quite a bit different than what you expected as well, correct?
You might even say, another problem they ran into.
Yeah. So the way the bumper recesses are on the loading station and the cargo ship. So when bumpers go into the bumper recess, the part on top of it can enter in your frame perimeter and actually do some damage. And the way our swerve modules are this year, like the very top of the Neo is like 8.25 inches off the ground, and that cutout, the recess, is like 8 inches off the ground. So just the top of the Neos. No. And we broke a lot of Neos. I wasn't keeping track, but apparently 7 Neos. And we didn't, for like most of the day Saturday, we didn't really know why they were breaking until we started watching some video and thinking about it a little harder. We were just fixing them, spending most of it just replacing Neos.
That's an expensive problem. I'm sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, it's okay. The worst part was like we didn't have one of the steering motor on the swerve modules has uses one of those 15 to 32 dp Indy Mark pinions that's pressed on, and we didn't like have enough extras, so we were having to like press them off, which essentially involved destroying the Neo to get to use them on like replacement Neos. And luckily it didn't cost us too much. We did play one match without the rear 2 modules steering, but we still sort of worked.
Yeah, I'm sure Greg Nadell is very excited that the Neo Swerve module is getting beaten up pretty badly right now. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really fair. Like, I bet a sim would have taken it, but I don't think it's really fair.
A sim would have taken it because it's so much taller, and you would have never fit under there in the first place, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we were actually going under, or I don't know. I should review the video a little more. But the Neo's casing is not, the top casing is not very big. It's not very beefy. I don't think it's really meant for stuff like that.
Yeah. If I remember, the profile is a little bit less than the mini sim.
It's quite a bit shorter, and it's a little smaller diameter.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's so hopefully teams have some time between now and their competitions this weekend, or maybe you can do it on practice day for those of you who are attending regionals to maybe take those tweaks into consideration in your code and that sort of thing. But let's talk about actually scoring and playing the game. I think you said that you were able to score a lot more than anticipated, correct?
Yeah, a little bit more.
Oh, boo-hoo. Yeah, what a problem.
I don't know. I tend to be less optimistic. I try to be realistic, and like some, but yeah.
I'd kind of concur with Patrick. Because I know our guys came in, and girls came in with some practice and not a lot of practice, and basically 0 practice in Sandstorm. And I was actually really quite impressed at how quickly our drive team was able to kind of pick up the hang of scoring, especially and navigating around with Sandstorm. With, I mean, we had a Logitech C270 camera, which has an absolutely horrible field of view, but it's what we had at the time because we couldn't get our fisheyes to play nice with the limelights yet. And then we had a limelight that was doing target finding, but no actual control of the robot. It would just let them line the center of the target up with the crosshair. And they got really good at that. And I think, I was kind of going and expecting that we would not be able to reliably score a game piece every Sandstorm if our kind of auto paths weren't totally working. And
right.
So
for those guys who played on the field this weekend, Evan and Patrick, were you driving basically via camera in Sandstorm, or did you have autonomous routines plugged in? Like, did you get a sense of what people were doing and like what was more or less reliable?
At Mount Vernon, I think basically everybody was doing just first-person view driving with a camera, and including us. And that's not like the final goal, but by the end of the competition, we were able to place a hatch on the front of the cargo ship and pick up another one and get most of the way to where the close side of the rocket just with first-person driving.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Team 973 at the Orange County Regional, they did the same thing. They just drove via camera using their teleop controls, and they were able to like put a hatch right on the cargo ship every time and go and pick up a second one most of the time. They actually won the autonomous award, which I thought was pretty funny, even though they had no autonomous code on their robots. So.
It looked like 973. I think we might have some video of them that we can share, but it looked like 973 had some of their automated vision stuff working for a routine, just like what Patrick was talking that they were trying to do, where you get close and the limelight can kind of take you in and do the final score sequence. I'm not sure if that was true or not, but it certainly looked like that's what it was doing, based on how consistently Greybots were actually scoring those game pieces.
They are using vision. Adam was in our lab a bunch this year, kind of, getting some tips and tricks. But I think that's going to be really awesome because now you have this thing where you can have your robot. You can program in like little bits using automation. Like just if we get the robot near the pickup, use vision to do the rest. And now your autonomous routine, instead of having to like follow trajectories and like do all this really hard stuff, you can kind of like get the robot kind of close, and then that one little autonomous routine that you write that helps you in both teleop and now the Sandstorm is going to like elevate you to the next level. So I think that's really cool. I don't know if we'll see past this year if people are able to kind of use the camera and drive their robot around, or if this is just a novelty for 2019. But I think it'll be really interesting to watch, and I think a lot of teams will be really productive during the Sandstorm period by the end of the year. So that's really cool.
I know that's that's our goal. We actually started off. We had some autonomous paths written, but we didn't get enough of a chance to really tune them in. So we tried running it first match, and just absolutely T-bone Sonic Squirrels, knocked them totally off kilter. I think they still almost scored the hatch after we did that.
Not very squirrely.
Yeah, no. We were, but our driver, came back from that and said, I can actually navigate pretty well, just based on the camera, and so she got good at that, and so now we're still pursuing the path route just because we think it'll be faster, but we can kind of do the camera subroutine separate from that, and then we either run a path and then run the camera subroutine, or we'll just navigate, via driver control and then use the camera subroutine. But they can kind of be disconnected in that way. So I really like it. I think it's a neat twist on the challenge. I also just saw a lot more robots scoring things week one during the first 15 seconds than I think I've ever seen before. So that was surprising and a welcome change.
Yeah, Nick, I'd love to hear what you're looking at preparing for this week at St. Joe's in Indiana.
We're on the drive to the spot and let the Limelight camera take over aligning the robot train. The Limelight is a fantastic product and it's pretty game changing for FRC. It's one of our controls mentors tonight put it in words of it's basically a vision systems mentor in a box. Which is a great way to put it. But yeah, basically we drive near to where we need to go, whether it be the front of the cargo ship or the bottom of a rocket or whatever. Drive near there, let the Limelight take control of the drive base and put us almost where we need to be, and then make the last final touch with because we actually lose vision pretty because our robot's so small and our camera is at the very back of the robot, so we lose sight of the target once we're within a few inches of it. So at that point, we basically just drive in and use a secondary camera to say that, yep, we're in the right spot, and then fire the panel off.
Yeah, we keep losing the target because our swerve drive just... Never mind. Sorry.
Good stuff. So we actually have a question that we're going to take now because it's so on topic. And this is from TS Thunder. And the question is, does 2910 use field-oriented in Sandstorm or robot-oriented?
We use robot-oriented. And it just makes more sense when you're driving with the camera mounted on the robot.
But you do actually switch back to field-oriented for teleop, right? You've kind of got the different modes that you run.
Yeah, so right now the like Sandstorm and teleop run the exact same code, and our driver just holds down a button, and when he holds the button down, it's robot-oriented.
Mm.
And when he releases it, it's field-oriented, and he drives the entire match field-oriented after the Sandstorm.
Gotcha. Cool. So one last thing on Sandstorm before we move on to the next topic. Patrick, do you have one really good piece of advice for teams to remember during Sandstorm?
Yeah, so this year it's a lot different where like you can hold your controller when the match starts, and like at Mount Vernon week 1, I don't know, a lot of people didn't realize this, so they were waiting to pick up their controllers until the match started. I mean, most of like the teams who know what they're doing already know this, but as a drive coach, like you're like, come on guys, we're like, like when the Sandstorm comes down, you're really sort of desensitized towards what's going on, and you don't have like the autonomous period to kind of like wake you up and let you know the match has started and you need to be ready. So yeah, I don't know, just a little thing.
It sounds like it's a really good thing to remember. All right, so let's push on to our next big topic for the night, and that's defense. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And it looks like a lot of teams got wrecked, absolutely wrecked in week 1. So
yeah,
let's talk about that.
Defense is here, and it's not going to go away. I think most of us looked at the game from right off the bat, realized that there were no protected zones around any of the major scoring elements other than the hab at the end, and said, yeah, you're going to see some really amazing defense, but it's I mean, it came out in force. Like, you looked at you watched 973 that we just saw the video of. I think they went out in their first qualification match and scored like 13 game pieces, and then you watch them in semifinals against 5012 and they score like 4.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, but they still won the event.
I agree. Yeah, because they had 330 with them, and 330 was scoring game pieces, right? But like the difference maker that good defense can be is absolutely incredible in terms of equalizing alliances.
Yeah, I was watching 1747 at Gainesville. They went out of state, out of Indiana State, to go play in Georgia for a little bit of a warm up, and the robot was broken in finals match 1. I guess they tore an air hose out or something at the start of the match, or basically didn't have pneumatics, and their entire robot, the big crazy carriage they have, relies on pneumatics to do anything. So they went and played defense, and for periods of the match, they were shutting down 2 robots at once without really anything special about the way they were playing defense. It's because the choke points on this field are so massive. It's pretty easy to just slot yourself in basically between the front of the cargo ship and a rocket, and you can pretty easily control the pace of an alliance with just a couple smart moves.
I think one of the big differentiating factors of a good defense robot versus an okay defense robot, because I think most robots that have reasonable drivers and aren't stupidly top heavy can play some pretty decent defense. But the really top defenders are the ones that can play both sides of the field regardless of which alliance, like which driver station they're in.
Yep.
I know that's
Mhm.
something that handicapped us a little bit in finals. That we played against 2910 and Mount Vernon finals, and we had a robot with some as our third partner with some pretty good drivers, but um, they hadn't really played defense during the event so far. We just picked them because they had good drivers, and they were really great to work with. But we weren't about to send them, cross field where the robot's hidden behind the cargo ship and ask them to stay out of trouble. So we were playing defense on 2930 Sonnet Squirrels for finals as opposed to 2910, which I don't know if it really would have made a difference because 2910 and 2930 could both put up amazing amounts of points, but it was just kind of a consideration that as we get deeper into the season, those teams that excel at knowing exactly how to position their robot even when they can't see it perfectly on the other side of the cargo ship, those are the ones that are going to be the excellent defenders.
Yeah, the sightlines are wicked crazy this year. There's such a huge blank space at the end of the field, something we haven't seen since 17. But even then, you didn't really have a reason to be all the way over there unless you were doing the two peg strat. Patrick, can you talk a little bit about what you saw with sightlines this weekend and what your mindset was with playing strategy or playing defense rather?
Yeah, so kind of how it tended to work, like in like elimination matches or playoffs. So like we were the 1 seed, so we got the middle driver station. Um, like our first pick gets the left one, and third pick gets the right, or so. So we to play like the right half of the field and kind of justify our drive team towards like the right side of our station, and um, sort of use the length of our Xbox controller cables to kind of like stand a little bit into the one next to us, and then the people in the left, the one driver station, the first pick, 2930, they like generally handled the left field, because it is pretty difficult, especially when you have a really short robot, to see what's going on the opposite side of the cargo ship. The rocket, seeing to the opposite side rocket or is easy, but the back side of the cargo ship's pretty difficult. And
That's
then
that's actually a really interesting point. The fact that it seems that the alliance captain is at a bit of a disadvantage for sightlines.
yeah, so they didn't like so I guess you're not supposed to like really deviate more than like half a driver station from your driver station.
Mhm.
But we were definitely using like the wires on the Xbox controller to take full advantage of that, and especially when you're trying to place on the side of the cargo ship without vision, if you can get a better angle at it, it's definitely makes it easier.
Yep.
And the way
Yeah,
it
and
lines. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to add that this gets into what Tom was saying about the little camera routines, and I mean on Apex, without having some kind of automated targeting, it was pretty difficult for us to do the side rocket or side cargo ship hatches. We can do it, but making sure that it's lined up and that you're not going to hit the pegs, we were just quite a bit slower than doing cargo, and so we just basically kind of avoided running those all weekend unless we had to. Um,
Hmm.
the cargo, and I don't know if you'll agree with me, Patrick, but I thought the cargo was quite a bit easier on the cargo ship to line up and make sure it went in quickly
Yeah,
than making sure that the hatches went on.
I definitely agree.
Definitely. So it looks like we've actually got another good question that we'll take in line with this topic. If Seth can throw that up on the screen, and it's from Dark Matter Miss Magius. And the question is, with defense being so good this year, do you see it as an optional or necessary strategy? And, you guys want to comment on that?
I want to hear Tom's thoughts.
Yeah.
I'll bite first.
Mr. Copart.
Go ahead, Nick. Go ahead, Nick. I gotta come up with something.
Yeah, I'll let Tom think. I think it's until let's say I'll say the yellow cards or red cards start flying. I'd say that the 2+1 strategy is super important this year, especially at events that are not necessarily the deepest, where you can probably trust somebody's drivetrain, but can't necessarily trust the rest of the robot. They may be a much more valuable asset being a wall than they are trying to score game pieces. And I know it's kind of tough to say to somebody, but at the same time, that's probably a good way for them to actually contribute this year, because it's really not that hard to play decent defense for this game. I think it's pretty important for most events that you're at least evaluating the 2+1 strategy, where 2 scorers and 1 defender for most events.
Yeah, I mean, I think defense is going to be important as well, but I mean, due to the fact that if you're in an elimination situation, you can take your third best robot and like effectively take out their first best robot, assuming their first best robot, isn't designed to be really good against playing at defense. I think it's going to be interesting. Like when we get to championships and you have 4 team alliances and you get to pick where each team goes in a driver station. Like, how are people going to decide who to put where, right? Because if I'm the alliance captain and I'm the best scoring robot and I put myself on the right because I think that I have some advantage by being on one side, like if I'm on the other side of that, I'm going to take my defense robot and stick them on the left. So they have like the best sight lines to play defense against. So I have to look at the manual to see, like, is there a race condition there? Does like the red alliance get to like choose last or something like that? I know when you put your robots on the field, the red alliance gets to choose last. But like you can actually kind of game the stations this year as well.
My recollection for the way the driver stations work is both alliances submit a lineup card and they don't actually know what the other alliance is doing, and then it gets put into the FMS and you find out when you load on the field. So it's blind picks. I'm really excited to see how that plays out. I also think that there's a based on what we saw in the early weeks of kind of splitting the field, that there's maybe some desire to actually put your defense robot in the middle and have them kind of slide to one side or the other just to be able to, play both sides more easily, or just kind of counter that strategy of putting your really good robot on one side and say, well, if I put my defense bot center station, whichever one you go to, I can flex that. I personally think that defense is a necessary strategy, not necessarily the only strategy, but I would be really, really surprised, especially when we get into like championship level 4-team alliances, to see any alliances that don't have an option to put a defense robot out there. I mean, just playing this weekend and seeing what happens when you get 4 robots on one half of the field, it gets really cluttered up. And so if I'm sending a defense robot over and they're not, that immediately gives my defense bot an even bigger advantage. So we may see it get to the point where you can do a 3 cyclers strategy effectively into defense, but I think that takes a very special set of robots, and the default is going to be mostly the two scorers and 1 defender. Just because of how much more effective how much easier it is to have effective defense than it is to have effective 3 cyclers. We'll see how it plays out later in the season.
Exactly. And one of the things that we may or may not see this year that we tend to see in other years with defense is being able to just maneuver out of the defender's way. Which brings us to our next topic, moving sideways. Is it a waste of time? Tom, let's lead off with you, and then we'll kick that over to Patrick.
I plead the fifth on this one. Patrick?
I'll just grab the popcorn.
I don't think it's a waste of time.
Patrick's got a Einstein finalist medal, a couple of blue banners from last year, and one so far this year that says it's not.
Yeah, so
Hey,
like
I've got 4 world championships that says that it is. So
that's true. So 2910 has never won a blue banner without a swerve drive. Which is just a fun fact. I don't
Fair
know.
point.
I don't
think
know.
what we got up right now is the highlight reel that 2910 put together from their event. So we'll see a lot of moving sideways here as we talk about it.
I think it's interesting, actually. Like, if you look at the landscape of first, even 3 or 4 years ago, I think that doing something like a swerve drive probably wasn't worth it. You know, different motor selection, not as much development into it, like at a community level. It wasn't as easy to just pick up and run with. But now there's been so much code released. We have much better motors. There's a bunch of off-the-shelf components you can use to put it together. So I think it's actually much easier to do now than it was a few years ago. So I think 2910 is cool. I love watching the robot driver. It's awesome. Them and Strikeforce, I think, are the best swerve robots.
Yeah, I mean,
those guys really
a good swerve is gorgeous to watch.
Yes.
Yeah, we're too old on 2v4. All old fogies. We're not gonna try this new thing.
I think it's, you bring up some good points, and I think it's like I liken it a little bit to pneumatics. That like back in the day, right? Back when Tom and I were starting first, right? It was like 13 pounds if you wanted to put a pneumatic system on your robot.
Oh man.
Between the metal air tanks and that giant Thompson compressor and all the giant fittings and everything. And nowadays you can get a complete pneumatic system in like 4 pounds, right? Including the compressor. Right. And so it still takes up some space, less than it used to, right? We have the PCM instead of the spikes and all that jazz. But you still find people that are like super duper against putting a pneumatic system on the robot for like 1 or 2 pneumatic actuations because it's this huge hit to the robot. And while I certainly think if you're only going to use 1 or 2 things, it's worth considering not doing it. There tends to be so little cost to it to actually put pneumatics on that, like, on Apex, we just plan to put a pneumatic system on because we always find something later in the season that we want to add a little thinger for, and it's just so much easier if you've already got the system on there. And so we just find things to make pneumatics during the design process. And I think it's like I look at Swerve nowadays kind of going through a similar thing where it used to be this massive amount of overhead to do a swerve drive, and now with the better motor controller options, newer, lighter, faster motors, and a lot of the cool off-the-shelf options, including swerve drive specialties where you can actually just buy Jack in the Box swerve drive basically, and start programming it. Like that sort of basic minimum level that you have to get to in order for it to pay off is much lower.
Yeah, and with brushless motors coming in, hopefully we'll see more options as well next year. It used to be that you'd have to spend 4 of your PDP slots on kind of garbage motors to do the steering, and then you could only drive with 4 sims, and if you're used to driving with more than that, that's kind of a downfall. But like, you're going to be able to throw more power than this thing can possibly handle, so it doesn't really matter where the motors are, right? So I think we're going to see a big jump in swerve in the next few years. I think a lot more teams will try it.
Absolutely.
We've already seen it in Pacific Northwest this year.
Yeah. I think that this game lends itself to, not even just swerve, but, holonomic drivetrains in general. You've got a quarter field cycle. It's the distance really lends itself to it, because you're going to spend a lot of time turning your robot where you can just, move sideways. We did have a question.
118's got an H drive.
Yeah.
I think there's supreme merit to, at the very least, if you can have especially the hatch panel, if you can have that hatch panel move left and right a little bit, whether it be by the actual robot moving or the whole mechanism can slide left and right, or there's some misalignment things you can build into your mechanisms or hopefully have built in at this point. It's super valuable for cycle times because 90% of the things you're doing is that last 4 inches of alignment for this game.
Absolutely. We had another question on someone on this topic from TS Thunder, which is how to make the most out of a swerve drivetrain. So if we can get a quick hit on this question from Patrick, and then we'll move on to looking at week 1 by the numbers.
I think you should definitely try to make it field-oriented drive. We've found that it is like a completely different thing to drive. I personally am really not good at it. But once you get the hang of it, it seems like can be more effective. And if your drivers don't have a ton of practice with like standard type driving, that's usually works. Like they can get pretty good without too much practice. I don't know. People say it's really hard to drive, but it's not actually. And with field oriented drive, definitely try to do that.
That's some great advice for our viewers out there.
And then
all right. Go ahead.
Another thing, like if you want to do swerve drive, like it is getting more accessible, but it's still like you have like it's kind of like 8 degrees of freedom you're controlling in all your motors and stuff instead of just like 2. And so, and you have like closed loop control on your steering, and there's just tons more wiring, and it's a lot more complicated. So you have to. There's all these extra failure points electrically, even if your modules are mechanically really solid. So that's all stuff that you should make all your electrical super clean. And so when something does go wrong, it's easy to figure it out just because there's so much more stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely great points there. So with all that being said, let's take a quick look at week 1 by the numbers and dig into these a little bit. So we saw high scores in the 90 to 105 point range. So I think our high scoring qual match without penalties was a 98. High scoring playoff match minus penalties was 90. And then our highest overall scoring match with penalties was 106 points. How's that comparing to what you guys are thinking going into week 1?
Honestly, that surprises me. I think it would have been a little bit lower than that usually.
Yeah.
And I'm going to attribute it to how much more successful teams were in Sandstorm than they normally have been in Autonomous, right? When you've got the majority of teams at an event going out and scoring a game piece in, some percentage of their qualification matches, that's going to up the score. But I think even then I guess I was overall surprised at the level of scoring at week 1. And some of that may also have just been due to, kind of a slightly related thing, but at least at Mount Vernon, the field basically just didn't break, right? It was I know there were some events that had some issues with the loading station hatches, going into the brushes correctly, but overall, it seems like a really robust field and something that didn't differ too much from what teams had, kind of come in expecting, other than that vision issues. So I don't know if everybody's experience was like that week 1, but certainly for us in PNW, I think that was something that helped us get higher scores.
Related to actual
Sorry, for those of you in the chat, the video we're showing right now is one of the high-scoring penalty-free matches that we saw over the weekend, and this is 330's 90-point match. Sorry.
Yeah.
Did that Sandstorm thing break at any events? I was kind of thinking that was going to break all the time.
There were a few foghorns from it, from various things of like mismatched speeds between the two sides, or mostly just small, tiny detail issues that I'm sure they will get ironed out for week 2 and forwards, but definitely not as many as I think people were expecting. But a lot of it really comes down to setting it up right the first time, and there's a lot of little pieces to it. And if you don't, it doesn't work well. A lot of the foghorns, from what I saw, were pretty early in events and got sorted out later.
Yeah, I think we had one foghorn replay at Mount Vernon due to a robot hitting the wall too hard and in Sandstorm and actually causing the curtain to go up early. But overall, for the most part, I think the Sandstorms worked as intended for
what?
the majority of the matches.
The curtain went up early from a robot hitting the wall too hard?
Yep.
All the electricity went into the motor.
Well, it's not the retraction isn't a motor, I don't think, right?
Yeah, it's a bag motor and a versus planetary.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So, Patrick, earlier we talked a little bit about how you were able to score more than you anticipated. What were you expecting for high scores going into this week?
More along the lines of like 60, 70.
Gotcha.
Just trying to be realistic, but yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the high score is as long as you win, right? So
absolutely. And I believe. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I just thought of something that like we haven't even touched on with Patrick in here the entire time, is that you guys can't score on the top level of the rocket. Like,
can't even score
how did you?
Not even.
How did you decide to get to that? Like, that's a pretty big kind of part of the game to throw away. And I think this will lead us into our next topic. But like, how did you kind of foresee that it might be hard to get that rocket done fully?
So we're like, I don't think we're really at the point on 2910 where we can reasonably do everything in a game like this. And I think we've done a good job setting our focus on like a robot that we can reasonably accomplish building and have like an extra week and a half at the end of build season to test and iterate. So it kind of came down to like this big decision between, are we going to go for the level 3 climb, or are we going to try to make a tall robot or a robot that can reach the upper levels of the rocket? And we
sounds like you made the right trade-off.
And I mean the team was sort of split, but we kind of all worked to conclusion eventually. And so like I think that's one of the, like, we like the week 1 event because we are like try to be really good about making a robot that we can, or trying to go after a robot that we can actually accomplish. This was the first year we've had a practice robot that was the same as the competition robot. And I think our robot is pretty simple, and it does what it does very well. So yeah, I guess. And like based on our analysis, we like there was kind of this, some people on our team thought like the low robot is kind of the same as a switch bot from last year, but it really isn't. A low robot this year can still win events and stuff. Whereas last year, if you didn't own the scale the whole match, you basically lost.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a huge number of small bots, a little bit more than we were anticipating, which is going to affect rocket RP numbers. So let's talk about that. And let's lead into that with, I was absolutely 100% wrong last week when I said, we'll see about 10% completion. Looking at the numbers on the Blue Alliance Insight page, we're seeing 2% complete rockets, but only 0.7% of those rockets completed due to game pieces. So about more than half of those rocket RP came from penalties. So let's talk about that.
It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Gotta put a lot of things up there. Don't got a lot of time. People hitting you. 2910. You guys definitely made the right call. I think as we go later into the year, teams will get better. Obviously, it's just week 1, and we still haven't seen a lot of really awesome teams play or even reveal their robot yet, to be honest. So I think you'll see that number go up over time, but it's going to be more. It's definitely going to be the more difficult thing to do. And only some special robots are going to be able to accomplish it. We'll see.
To me, it feels a lot like the Fuel RP in 2017 in terms of the number of teams that realistically can accomplish it. It's a little bit different in terms of the physical challenge of being able to do it is not as much, but actually being enough faster that you can wither making some mistakes in the match and still getting it and still having enough time to climb. Certainly 118, 330, 1690 orbit, they are all capable of doing it, but I don't think any of them completed a rocket more than twice during their qualification matches, right? And that just goes to show how difficult it is. I think the other thing that becomes obvious as you start watching the speed at which it needs to be done is it's really extremely difficult to have more than one robot work on a rocket at a time. Possible,
and the match, the match we're watching right now is the qualification 30 where 118 solos a rocket, and you'll note it takes him about the entire match to do it.
A robot is ridiculous.
Yeah,
like how it's up to full speed in like the blink of an eye. I don't think I've ever seen a robot accelerate that fast before. I don't know if they have something special in that drivetrain. I think it might just be really light. And geared effectively, but like I love watching that robot. It's so cool.
Yeah, and we did see earlier at that event that Spectrum and 118 played a match together, and they tried to split a rocket where one of the robots dealt with hatches and one started to deal with cargo a little bit later, and it just did not work. They totally tripped over each other, and it's just there's not enough space to move two robots around each other, even especially in a qual match where you're only playing together maybe once. It's really hard to coordinate that, and it just straight up did not work for them at all.
Right, and one of the important things to note in this match is that there was 0 defense played on 118. So they had complete freedom to do what they wanted and basically have their way with that rocket. And it's beautiful to see that machine work. But I still fear for that drivetrain if somebody gets on them and starts pushing them around.
I am curious to see, just as a quick note, if we are going to start seeing defense show up in qual matches against the teams that are completing rockets solo, because that is something that's very different from, say the Fuel RP, in that it really is defendable. But defense in qual matches has historically not been very prevalent, right? You might see it once, but I think that 118 and the other teams that are going for Rocket RP by and large will have free reign to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, it kind of has some echoes. I hope I'm wrong, but it sounds like it has a couple echoes of like Toronto 2012. With it is gross, but I really hope that like single teams don't get singled out in every match where they're defended against because they are eligible to get that RP and able to. I don't like that. Like I'm not saying I hate defense. Don't get me wrong, but I hope we don't get to that where it's a single team who is the only team at the event that can solo a rocket, gets defended every time, and never gets to. It's kind of sketchy. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the RP that can't be defended, and that's the hab docking. And during quals this past week, we saw that just over 25% of matches saw that hab docking RP. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. If you'd have told me that like week 3 of build season, I would have laughed at you. I would have expected week 1 to have like a 5% success rate. Because looking at that during build season, it looked like it was going to be crazy hard, and not a lot of people were going to actually be able to successfully do it. And also, I just generally don't trust my partners to get on the platform at the end of the match. So I figured that was going to be the thing that would bite us. And then here we are, 26.5%, and everything's great. I feel just the same way I did after watching so many teams able to climb ropes in 2017. Because when we saw that game, I was like, holy crap, that's going to be really hard. And then you read the manual, and it's like, okay, it's not that hard. But
absolutely. Patrick, I'd love to hear your input on this. Obviously, you guys went with a low robot, and it seems like you focused on having a good hab climb. Do you think that's playing somewhat into the numbers we're seeing this week?
Yeah, the hab climb is like a technically difficult thing to do, but if you get it worked out, it doesn't take very long.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I saw something.
Sorry, it's the far easier ranking point for an average team to get, because you can take a whole minute to get up there if you want, right? And as long as you've got a partner that comes up on the end, you'll be fine. I mean, so to throw out an example from the Mount Vernon district, because I really haven't watched anything else because I was competing, but 360, their other scoring mechanisms basically weren't working, and they knew it, right? And so they played defense and then climbed, but until they knew how long it was going to take them to climb, they'd start climbing at like 75, 80 seconds, right? They'd get off the thing, they'd go play a little bit of defense, they turn around, they go back, and they were up on the platform with 75 or 80 seconds left in the match, right? And they were winning matches and they were getting ranking points because it's just that many points and worth that much. And they ended up ranked, right? I think they were like
Mm-hmm.
number 7 seed. That's so it's an easier ranking point to get. It's worth a lot of points in early in the season. I think a lot of people understand the power of that, compared to the Rocket RP, which I feel like a lot of teams made the choice that 2910 and Apex did. That if doing the Rocket seems like too much of a stretch, just focus your efforts on the other stuff.
Absolutely. Very good points there, Evan. I want to quickly talk about the cargo ship before we move on to our week 2 gameplay predictions, and looking ahead at that sort of thing. So it turns out that the front of the cargo ship statistically is much harder to do than the sides. So at least for cargo, we saw the front was completed at just over 30%, but we're seeing 40 to 60% completion for the sides of the rocket during quals. And it was a little bit closer to that normal completion, about 65% having the front completed for cargo and 70 to 80% completion on the sides. And the hatches were really far off with, gosh, I think this was because of null hatches, but 86% of cargo ship hatches were placed on the side, where 46% were placed on the front, and nearly 100% placed on the sides and limbs, and 75% placed on the front.
And that includes null hatches, those numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's only 25% of the targets are on the front, right? So it's probably going to tend to skew that way, just due to like how many things there are to do, right?
Yeah.
I don't see. Patrick, did you notice that it was harder to score on the front or the side? I haven't seen this personally in our testing, but
yeah. So I think the statistic with the cargo in the front, you can't put a null hatch on the front, so you have to like get a hatch up there in the sandstorm or in teleop. So whereas I think in most matches people were using also the cargo ship in the front, one of the walls is sort of like angled inwards towards the center of the field, so the actual where you have to get the ball through is smaller. And until we got our like release speed dialed in, we were shooting it too high, and we would sort of hit it where it was skinnier up at the top.
Yeah, I think we saw a little bit of that in the highlight video that you guys put together, which we watched earlier in the show.
Throw catch. Yeah, we've had the same issue in practice too. It's a really difficult place to score if you have a short robot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just your margin for error is lower.
Yeah,
it's a couple of those two.
Yeah. I think the cargo ship completion numbers are a little bit higher than I was expecting, but that may play more into how much emphasis teams are putting in on vision this year with their robot. So it'll be interesting to see how those numbers change throughout the upcoming weeks.
I mean, a lot of it's just efficiency too, right? Like the cargo is worth 3 points, the hatches are worth 2 points. If you can start null hatches, if you can only score 8 game objects, your best bet is to go null or 6 game objects or whatever, right? Your best bet is to go null hatches and score all cargo. That's going to give you the most value for your cycles. So, teams, especially early on when they're not sure how many cycles they can do, at least, I've been impressed that they're making the smart choice. I think it'll be interesting as we get later into the season. There's kind of 2 reasons to not put null hatches on. One of them is because you expect to score an actual hatch panel on the side, and the other is because you want the cargo to be sitting out there for you for the rocket. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes as we get deeper into the season.
Yeah, I think I expect to see those decisions made around week 3 or so. But we got to get through week 2 before we get to week 3. So let's talk week 2 gameplay predictions. There are a few events that we think are really going to be ones to watch this weekend. Tom, do you want to talk about CVR? Tom, you're muted.
How about that? So, I mean, week 2, teams have had another week to iterate on their robots. Hopefully, not by taking them out of the bag, but we're going to see a lot of good teams come out this week and play. I think CVR is going to be a really interesting event to watch. The 2 teams that I'm looking at there are the Citrus Circuits and 1323, both of which were Einstein teams in Houston last year. We're really close to both of these teams, and everybody's seen 1678, but I've seen both of these robots, and they're both just fantastic. 1323 is going to be incredibly good this year. So I'm really interested to see if they pair up. I can't, we'll see. Anything can happen, but I think it's more likely than not that they'll be together. So that'll be a fun eliminations to watch.
Absolutely. And then Texas has gone to districts this year, so they do get unbagged time. And one of the events that is really going to be important to watch this week is Amarillo, where we have 3310 and 148 making their season debuts. Does anybody have any comments on that event?
I'm excited. Districts are just a whole different ball game from regionals. And something that comes with districts is 12 qualification matches. So I think, I don't think anybody's seen 3310 yet. I don't think they've revealed unless they did it during the show. 148 obviously had their had their awesome reveal video. Really sweet looking robot. We'll see how different it is when they come out. With 148's manufacturing capabilities, I can't imagine what they can do with unbag time. So it's going to be really interesting to see what those robots are, and see if there's any sort of other contenders in the mix. 3310 and 148 are traditionally very strong teams, but one thing that I've learned from districts is that there's usually somebody else that's going to come and surprise you. I think Squirrels was the perfect example last week. That nobody kind of expected them to come out and be that strong, because that's that they're not a traditional powerhouse, but they were absolutely one of the top robots at the event. So I'm excited to see if there's anybody else in Texas at these events that kind of shows up to play.
Yeah, it's important to note for these teams, they're going to be playing the number of qualification matches on the first day of their district that they would play during quals in an entire regional over 2 days. So it's going to be interesting to see how they may have changed their robot design process to account for those extra matches. Teams that make it all the way to finals are going to be seeing 16 to 19 matches over the course of the entire event, which is double what most teams are seeing at regionals, which is, I don't think about that too much, but I wonder how that's going to affect Texas this year. There's another event to watch this weekend, which is San Diego. Evan, do you want to talk a little bit about that? It looks like we have 987 and 1538 making their debuts this weekend.
Yep, 2 of my favorite teams, gorgeous looking robots. I don't think cows have revealed yet this year either. 987 just dropped their trailer earlier today, and just looks like another solid robot. Amazing vision tracking, like they're known for. Really, really fast. So they look like they're going to come out strong. Cows, kind of hit or miss at their first event typically. Sometimes they got everything dialed in, and sometimes they still have some kinks to work out. So it'll be interesting to see which version shows up this year, and again, who else, right? Those are the big names, but there's always somebody waiting to step up and take the podium.
Absolutely. And then kind of rounding out our list of events to watch is going to be Humber College. Nick, you want to tell us a little bit about what we're going to see north of the border?
Oh, Canada.
A couple robots that I think everybody's been waiting to really see how they do. 1114 is making their debut this week. They just posted a somewhat dark, but not quite dark image of the robot on Instagram earlier today. They called it Simbot Snowstorm, and they posted a photo by a bunch of snow, which is kind of funny. But it's a kind of traditional elevator robot, but there's a bunch of other crazy stuff going on that doesn't seem to be totally shown yet. There's like everything from like a mini sim on their intake to some stuff that looks like it's under the elevator. So definitely some mystique to see how that robot works. And we'll be also be playing with Team Dave, who had a full review video out a week ago or so. Robot looks pretty stout. Pretty simple. We'll see how the traditional arm robot that everybody was hoping 330 would build will play out at Humber this weekend. I'm excited to see them, but I'll have to be catching up because I'm competing this weekend as well.
What famous Dave did they pick this year to name their robot?
That's a good question.
I remember.
Oh, I don't remember.
First person who posts whichever famous Dave it was in the chat gets a free high five.
There you go. Tom, do you have any hot takes on what we're going to see this weekend?
Hot takes.
Maybe we go into your top 5 and then.
Well, I have a super hot take real quick. Evan was talking about the San Diego regional and how there's a couple of good teams there. My hot take is a team he didn't mention, 4481, the Rembrandts. I think they're from the Netherlands. I think they're going to win the whole thing. They were awesome at the Orange County Regional. And like they will have an event under their belt already where they were really good while all these other teams are just like trying to get their footing. It's like to already have an event under your belt in week 2 is an incredible advantage. So my money's on them. That would be cool if you could bet on first. That'd be awesome. Yeah. So anyway, it's that time of the week where we're going to talk about Tom's top 5. And you can go to Tom's top 5 spelled out FIVE.com and check these out for yourself. But if you want to wait a second, I'll do a nice little roll for you. And at number 5 this week, we have Team 330, the Beach Bots. I thought they were really awesome. It's their last year. I'm really sad to see that they're going. I hope that all of their mentors who have been overworked for all of these years, go to the beach or do something nice. But it looks like they're not going to be doing that anytime soon because they've qualified for champs and they're probably going to be doing really well there. Number 4, I had 1690 Orbit out of Israel. This is an awesome robot. If you didn't check out any of their matches, you should go look at them. I think they might be on YouTube or Twitch or something. Definitely worth looking at. They were basically just steamrolling people, and they got a couple of full rockets themselves, which was really awesome. Number 3, I have to go with 2910. I thought they were awesome. They were able to score really, really effectively. They were able to move around really, really fast. And Patrick was nice enough to come on our show this week. So, there they are. Number 2, they were at number 1 last week, so they moved down a peg, is 118. They have this crazy fast robot. They can move all over the place. They can score really fast. They can pick the stuff up really fast. They can get on the hab really fast. I think as the year goes on, they're going to be a little more susceptible to defense. But so far, they've been great. They won their regional, no problem. And at number 1, I have everybody knows them and loves them, Team 973. I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park with the robot they built this year. They had to make some design compromises. They're not at full power from what they've been in years past. They've lost some resources. They've lost some mentors. They had to cut down what they were doing, and they just picked everything perfectly. They can't score on the top level of the rocket, but it doesn't matter. You can, as long as you can get on that hab and get those ranking points, and maybe you throw together a couple of full rocket matches. Like you can still seat up near the top, and you can still do really well. They built a really small robot. They're able to share the hab. Oh, maybe not yet, but eventually they'll be able to share the hab with other people at the top. And I think they're going to be great as the year goes on. So number 1, 973. We'll see where they are next week, somewhere between 1 and 100.
Before we move on to our last topic of the night and then questions, speaking of sharing the top of the hab, 5803 and 2910 have this neat trick. I don't know if we have a picture that we can throw up of it.
We're saving that one.
Apparently we're saving that one. So we won't go too much into that. There is something else this weekend that was super hype, and Nick got to be a huge part of that, and I as well behind the scenes, and that's play-by-play. Nick, how was it being on the desk looking at, the best matches of 17 events just whipping around the globe?
Yeah, so broadcasting play-by-play from Manchester, New Hampshire with my broadcasting partner in crime, Mason Marquis, was an absolute blast. Being able to personally having all of the matches that I'd ever want to see at my fingertips was great. Having the setup there was really, really intuitive for doing broadcasting, but actually being able to, live the dream and give that NFL Red Zone style coverage, though I'm no Scott Hansen, it was definitely a lot of fun to chat about what was going on and what kind of the stories were. It was on twitch.tv/FirstInspires, and that's where it's going to be this coming weekend from 12 to 8 Eastern as well. I think the one thing that was really different about this, there's two things that were different, but the big one is that when we did First Champ Live, which is very similar coverage of covering all the divisions at once at the championship, the story is the same through every event you're covering. They're all in the same state, whether in early quals, late quals, or elims, alliance selection, whatever. This is different because all the events are staggered. So we're able to tell all of the stories all of the time because some events were early in quals and some events were late in quals. It was definitely a totally different way of doing it because you couldn't just stitch what was going on together in one fluid story. You had to keep track of, okay, here's all the crazy crap that's happening right now, and also it's happening everywhere. I don't know. I had a ton of fun, and I totally look forward to going back and doing that again in future weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited to be a part of the production crew again this week. I'll be flying out to Manchester on Friday. On the desk this weekend, we're going to have Ty Tremblay and Matt Stark of RSN. It's going to be a fantastic time. Steph
possibly with a full pleather jacket. Possibly.
Yes.
Can I say something as a fan? I'm involved in play-by-play as well, but this weekend I was just watching as a fan on Saturday morning, and I loved it. Like I never ever want to watch a regional the way I watched them before. Like having like the 8 screens open and having to figure out like who's playing where and like make it full screen. Like instead I just got to listen to Nick and Mason like tell me what awesome was going on. It was great. Like whew, I don't want to go to the lab. I just want to watch you guys.
and to think this week we have 33 events. I think it's so many. It's so many. You can't even fit that many in TBA Game Day.
Does not support that.
No, like and most computers.
Play-by-play does.
Yes,
so watch
like
play-by-play.
If your setup at home has 3 monitors, you could get most of the events if you put the Nonagon up on your left, middle, and right monitor, and you would still be short 5 events, 6 events. You should definitely watch play-by-play. Tell your friends to watch play-by-play.
Most people don't have 3 monitors, so you should just watch play-by-play and watch what's interesting and what's relevant. Definitely watch play-by-play.
Absolutely. So let's take a couple questions before we end the show tonight. Steph, if you want to give us our second to last question of the night, I think.
Rolling up now.
Drum roll. There was a question we were looking at earlier that we deferred. Let me find that. Here we go. What do you all look for in a first pick robot? How does cycle time compare to level 2 or 3 climbers? Patrick, let's send this over to you first.
How does cycle time compare to level 2 or 3 climber?
Like would you prioritize cycle time over a level 2 or a level 3 climb when you're picking, I think is what they're asking.
Um,
And he's gone.
Uh-oh.
All right, I could pick it up there. So, while we wait for Patrick to come back in, I'd say right now in the early week events, if you have the ability as the number 1 seed to pick a team that can get up on the 3rd level and share that space with you, that would be a really hard thing to say no to. Because the difference between the like absolute best cycler, unless they're 2910 or something like that, and the second best cycler, the third best cycler is not going to be that big. And you could like effectively go stick a defense robot on them and shut them down. But that climb is worth so much. And like as the year goes on, obviously like the cycling will become much more powerful. And the teams who have designed around, scoring over defense, so the teams with the swerve drives or the teams with the crazy arm that can do stuff, maybe we'll see those teams be able to like fight through that defense and get better. But right now, like the climbs are just so overpowered. So yeah, that's what I would be looking for if I was the number 1 seed.
All right, Patrick, now that you're back.
yeah. So this is interesting. So, like Tom was saying, if you could fit a robot, you'd pick them over a cycler. We kind of like we could have fit with 5803. We never. I guess maybe we're saving that, but
We never got a chance to try it because we had one
Right.
qual match together that we were going to attempt, and 5803 had radio problems, and we even got up on the hab despite that, and then comms dropped out and we fell off.
So we didn't think we needed it to event, so we ended up going with the next best cycler, which was and 2930 was the next best cycler by a lot. So we went with 2930.
And they had a level 2 also.
Yes. So it was a
point.
3.
Yep.
So,
Gotcha. Okay, so let's take a look at.
So I can talk from our perspective too, because Apex did end up as the number 2 seed, and we picked Skunkworks, who had a level 3 climb, as well as the ability to do level 2, and a large part of our selection of them was not just based on cycles, but also the fact that they had a reliable level 3 climb and were so highly ranked that we really didn't want to face off against a reliable level 3 in semis or later on in playoffs. And so combined with, the scoring capability that they did have on cycles, I think there may have been better pure cyclers out there. But as a whole package, that was important to us. Also, we'd had issues with our level 3 climb consistency throughout the event that we kind of finally got fixed right before playoffs, but we didn't have enough qual matches to really prove it to ourselves. And so we also wanted to have the option of, if for some reason our climb started failing, that we had the level 3 because it is so many points and it is so important. So, had things been, had those factors not been the case, I don't know how we would have valued it, but we certainly valued having another Hab 3 climb on our alliance for various reasons, even though we couldn't compatibly climb with them onto level 3.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting insight. So let's take a look at our next question. This is going to be from Harmonize. It's a bit of a long one. I wonder if it'll fit in the question box. My apologies if this has already been covered because I've been kind of backgrounding this. Any thoughts about if or how alliances will work to get a third robot involved in offense? Most of the strategies I've seen so far mostly focus on 2 robots doing most of the scoring and the other contributing as best as it can while staying out of the way, mostly involving defense.
So there's a couple ways you can do it, I think. Have that, you can kind of split that robot's time. If they can steal cargo balls and deliver them to another robot, that would be a way that I would involve a third partner in offensive scoring tasks, even though it's a defensive way to do it. I think that's pretty valuable. A lot of people don't necessarily, or a lot of robots don't have that ability shown yet to acquire cargo from without going inside the firm perimeter, but the ones that do would be valuable for that. You could also have them simply hunt down game pieces on your side of the field too. But at the same time, that's to me less desirable because it's already cluttered with 2 robots and a pile of game pieces on one side of the field. But probably just cycling game pieces towards a primary scoring robot might be an option.
Yeah, it might be interesting to see if you have your 2 high power robots doing the rockets on either side, and your third robot doing the cargo ship, potentially with some null panels already in place. That might be interesting. Every year there's every alliance needs what I call the butter robot. There's this episode of Rick and Morty where there's this little robot. It's like, what's my purpose? It's like, you pass the butter. And the same thing works in first alliances. There's one robot whose job is going to be to go out there and you park in the corner and move this thing around, right? And if you do it really well, we all benefit, and you'll help this alliance with the event. And last year it was kind of blocking the feeder station, right? And that was a really effective thing that teams could do. In spite of being able to do anything else. So I think it hasn't really kind of surfaced yet this year offensively. Defensively, you can definitely send somebody down and mess stuff up. You risk the fouls and stuff that go with that, but it might be worth it. So it'll be interesting to see how that third robot starts to fit into these more offensively powerful alliances. I think this week we'll start to see that. I think there's a little bit more depth at events this week than there was last week, and so
we'll
see.
It sounds like we have a new class of robot. So we have fridges and toasters that we've spoken about previously, and now Tom has graced us with Butterbot.
Yeah, it's the Butterbot. Pass the butter. And
yeah, I think that's definitely the most obvious solution. Is kind of the one that helps spread out game pieces and make it so your primary scoring robot cycles are much shorter.
Yep.
In terms of actually scoring game pieces, I think I agree that you might be able to get one on the cargo ship if your other 2 robots are working on rockets, but that's basically going to entirely rely on your opponent not playing defense, because I think once an opponent picks a side and goes in there and plays defense, you just get so cluttered in between with 3 robots in between the rocket and the cargo ship that it gets really difficult, other than maybe on the front of the cargo ship. But if so, you may be able to get somebody to score those 4. But other than that, it's it's really crowded back there. It's difficult to get to all your scoring locations with 3 robots.
Gotcha. All right, so let's move on to our last question of the night. This is from Shred DNA 3663. Is defense worth it with the possible fouls that they could draw?
That's a sweet username. Shred DNA. Patrick, why don't you think? Tell us what you think about this one.
I think it definitely is. Yeah, it totally is. We going in quals matches at Mount Vernon. The quals matches come so quickly, and because there's not very many teams at the event, and you have a lot of unexperienced teams. So we were a little bit hesitant to send people to play defense in quals just because we didn't know if they couldn't have counted on them to really know what they were doing and have read the rules and stuff. But I think down the road, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the foul for contacting the rocket in the last 20 seconds is only a qualification round penalty.
Yep.
It literally does not apply to playoffs. So that's one penalty that you don't have to worry about in playoffs. You still have to worry about knocking off game pieces. You still have to worry about not hitting people fully in their hab zone. But compared to previous years, I think it's actually a lot harder to get penalties on defense, or at least a lot easier to avoid penalties on defense. I don't know, Tom. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually just had a thought about this. If you're a rocket robot, you better get your rocket RPs at champs or even at any event really early, because I think you're going to see those last 2-3 matches of quals if I'm one of those teams that's on the bubble, I'm just going to be out there just wrecking everybody, right?
Yep.
Like,
Absolutely.
and this is something where even we saw it last year, where it really didn't make any sense to play defense during qualifications. And this year, it like really like can swing a match. So I think like the last 25 to 30 matches of championship divisions qualifications, it's just going to be an absolute bloodbath.
Yep, I totally agree. And one point about that rocket thing going away in playoffs, that rocket penalty, it opens the door a lot wider for Climb Chicken, where you can totally send somebody to stop the Hab 3 climber, especially if you trap them against the cargo ship. Both those robots negate each other, and if you keep your Hab 3 climber up on your side of the field, that's a huge swing of just literally being a wall in front of them. We haven't seen it really yet, but I could see Climb Chicken becoming a thing as well.
Yeah, we saw some defense played on us in quarterfinals by Cyborg Ferrets to try and deny climbs, and this was something that they were somewhat famous for in 2017 with the maneuver they called alien abduction, where they'd pick a robot, they'd trap them midfield and just turn sideways and say our climb's faster than yours.
Yep.
And the way that the Hab zone penalties work this year, if you know how to do it, it's not that risky. As long as you can get out before their bumpers are fully in the zone, you're good. So that's where, I mean, that's also where having the super fast climbers comes into play, right? Is not necessarily the ability to play chicken yourself, but the ability to weather that and make sure that if you get any opening, you're going to get up.
Yeah, and that's why the robots who are thinking about bringing two partners up onto the top Hab, I think those, like, I'm not sure that we will ever see it. And like, I will happily eat crow when some team ends up doing it. But like, if I was playing against that team, like say it was 1678, just because they're the one that's shown it off, like I would be on 1678, with 40 seconds, 50 seconds left, like you are just hitting them the entire time. Like, make them take as long as possible to get up there. And then they got to put their stuff out. And as soon as they like beat you to the Hab, then you just go to their like weakest partner and you just, beat the crap out of them. And to get all of that together, where all three of those teams have to get on there and then it all has to lift up, be balanced, it's just not going to happen. So I look forward to the YouTube clip of me saying this in like 6 weeks, but for now I can put that out there.
Excellent.
I mean, it kind of falls in line with the rest of what we've seen, which is that it's possible to do it. It's possible to solo a rocket. It's possible to lift two partners and and get all three robots on Hab 3. If you want to stop it, you can.
Yep.
Right? Like that's
kind of the bottom line about
how
that,
the game is
right?
played so far, and we'll see. We'll see if anybody can make an unstoppable rocket RP bot, but so far we haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That seems like a great point to leave off for tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, especially you, Patrick, for joining us. Congratulations again on your victory this weekend. We can't wait to see how the rest of your season plays out. Good luck this weekend to everybody who's going to be competing in either their first or second event. For those of you who are crazy enough to play week 1 and 2 back to back, it's definitely a bold strategy. Make sure. Make sure you tune into Play by Play this weekend. It's going to be awesome. And if you like what you see here, maybe you want to hit that subscribe button. Maybe you want to make sure you're turning on notifications for GameSense. The subscriptions that we get from that help us to put on these shows for you and to do events like Chesy Champs and First Champ Live and Play by Play and all the other cool things that we do. And it helps pay for the equipment that we do. So definitely consider throwing out a sub and following us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, maybe even Instagram. And you can also follow our posts on Chief Delphi as well.
Snapface, my face.
My snap.
all those social media things. With that, Thanks again to everyone who came out. Thank you to the folks in the chat for coming and watching and talking robots with us. I'm Ruth. For Evan and Patrick and Nick and Tom, thanks for joining us and have a great night.
Thank you, Stephanie, our great director.
And Stephanie, yay.